Sajid Mirza was a 52-year-old Dubai tycoon, Aaliya Khan a 23-year-old mystery bride with a past she thought she'd buried, until he uncovered it on their wedding night and turned their luxury suite into a murder scene. The wedding was the talk of Dubai, lavish, sudden, and deeply mysterious. It caught the attention of everyone from business tycoons to gossip bloggers. When 52-year-old property magnate Sajid Mirza announced he was getting married, many thought it was a joke. Sajid was famously private, rarely seen at social events, and had never once been linked to any romantic relationship. He had built his empire quietly, staying out of the limelight, except for occasional appearances in real estate magazines. So when word spread that he was marrying a woman less than half his age, no one could believe it. The bride, Aaliya Khan, was a vision. Just 23 years old, with delicate features and a calm, almost haunting presence, she seemed like someone from a movie. No one knew where she had come from. She wasn't from the elite circles of Dubai. She had no social media presence, no high-profile friends, and no known family attending the wedding. She arrived in style, though wearing an expensive designer outfit, dripping in diamonds and smiling like she had stepped into a fairy tale. The guests, handpicked by Sajid himself, couldn't take their eyes off her. The venue was one of Dubai's most exclusive hotels, where the guest list included foreign diplomats, CEO, and celebrities. It was a spectacle: massive floral installations, imported ice sculptures, and a 10-layer cake flown in from Paris. Guests danced beneath a chandelier of real crystals, while a world-renowned singer performed just for the couple. Cameras captured every moment, but something felt off to those who paid attention. While Sajid smiled for the photographers, he rarely looked at Aliyah. And she, though beautiful, barely spoke to anyone, keeping her eyes low and her words brief. There was a strange tension in the air. Some assumed it was nerves. An age-gap marriage can be uncomfortable, especially under public scrutiny. Others whispered about possible secrets. No one could understand how a man as calculated as Sajid could marry someone he had known for only a few months. It had been barely 6 weeks between their first public appearance and their wedding night. To his old friends, that was suspicious. Sajid never acted without research. He was the kind of man who read every line of a contract before signing. So why the rush? Why now? People speculated that Sajid had finally fallen in love. Others thought Aliyah had bewitched him, but a few, the ones who had known Sajid from the early days of his business career, suspected something darker. Sajid had enemies, people who had lost fortunes to him, business partners he had betrayed, and even distant relatives he had cut ties with over money. They wondered if this marriage wasn't love at all, but some sort of move in a larger, unseen game. The wedding ended with fireworks over the Dubai skyline. The couple left the venue just after midnight, stepping into a luxury Rolls-Royce as photographers snapped their final pictures. But while the world saw a rich man and his young bride heading toward a life of luxury, the truth was already beginning to unravel. Within hours, the fairy tale would collapse. By morning, the beautiful bride would be dead, and the groom would be in handcuffs. The dream wedding had only been the beginning of a nightmare. Sajid Mirza's journey to wealth had always been a subject of speculation. Decades before the glittering wedding, he arrived in Dubai as a struggling immigrant with nothing but ambition. In the mid-1990s, he worked construction jobs under the blistering sun, sending small amounts of money back to his family in Karachi. Colleagues remembered him as quiet, sharp-eyed, and obsessed with getting ahead. He was the type of man who never complained but never trusted anyone either. That silence made him difficult to read, and in business, that became his greatest weapon. By the early 2000s, Sajid had somehow acquired key plots of land just before Dubai's real estate boom. When prices soared, so did his fortune. He quickly transitioned from a laborer to a real estate developer, flipping properties, acquiring assets, and eliminating competition with cold efficiency. There were murmurs that not all his deals were clean. Competitors lost everything overnight. Associates who challenged him were quietly removed from contracts. In one case, a former partner accused him of fraud, only to disappear from Dubai weeks later. The case was closed without investigation. Nothing was ever proven, but Sajid's rise was steep and surrounded by shadows. Despite his growing empire, Sajid kept a low profile. He avoided parties, never dated publicly, and didn't indulge in flashy luxuries the way others did. He preferred control over his finances, over his employees, and over the narrative of his life. For years, he lived in a penthouse that had cameras in every corner. His phone was encrypted. His meetings were private. He built a business fortress, but behind it, he remained alone. That changed abruptly when Aliyah entered his life. No one knew exactly how they met, but within weeks of their first sighting together, he announced the engagement. He claimed she brought peace to his life, that she was the missing piece he'd waited years to find. But those close to him noticed something odd. Sajid wasn't relaxed or joyous in the days leading up to the wedding. He was paranoid. He started canceling meetings. He doubled the security at his home and installed 2 new surveillance systems. His longtime driver was replaced suddenly. He made drastic changes to his will, allocating large sums of his wealth into offshore accounts under unknown aliases. Most telling of all, he hired a private investigator based in Pakistan just 2 weeks before the wedding. According to leaked messages, he wanted a full background check on Aliyah, her family, her education, and her past relationships. The investigator returned with information that concerned Sajid, but no one knew the full details. What was certain, however, was that Sajid didn't call off the wedding. That puzzled everyone. He had the truth, whatever it was, but still chose to go through with the marriage. Some believed it was ego. Sajid wasn't a man used to losing. Maybe he thought he could control the situation, bend the truth to his will like he did in business. But others thought he was setting a trap. His calm demeanor at the wedding wasn't peace, it was planning. He wasn't celebrating a new beginning. He was preparing for an ending. Aaliya Khan's life before Dubai was nothing like the poised and polished image she presented at the wedding. Born in the crowded streets of Lahore, she grew up in a crumbling apartment complex shared by multiple families. Her father abandoned the family when she was a child, and her mother worked as a housemaid to keep food on the table. Aliyah was bright, observant, and restless. She always felt like she was meant for more than the poverty and limitations around her. From an early age, she watched the lives of the wealthy women her mother worked for, what they wore, how they spoke, how they moved through the world with power. She studied them carefully and silently decided that one day she would have that life. By her late teens, Aliyah had learned how to transform herself. She changed her accent, her walk, her wardrobe, bit by bit creating a new identity. She started modeling for small brands, then moved into promotional work at private events. These jobs exposed her to a different world, where older, powerful men were always looking for someone young and beautiful to entertain them. Aliyah became part of a quiet network of women who kept rich men company in exchange for gifts, vacations, and security. It wasn't something she ever admitted out loud, but it paid for her mother's medical bills and gave her a glimpse into the life she had always wanted. Things changed when she met a high-ranking married politician during a party in Islamabad. He was much older, but drawn to her charm and confidence. Their relationship remained hidden for months, but eventually turned into a secret marriage conducted through a private religious ceremony. For a while, Aliyah believed she had made it. He bought her an apartment, gave her a car, and promised her a future. But that future never came. He refused to make the marriage public. When she pressed him, he became cold and threatening. She discovered he had done this before with other women, and that they, too, had been silenced. Fearing for her safety, Aliyah vanished. She liquidated the small assets she had, destroyed her old phone, and left Pakistan. In Dubai, she started over, using fake academic credentials and a new identity to get a fresh start. She worked part-time jobs, avoided making friends, and lived quietly in a studio apartment. But the ambition never left her. She still wanted the life she dreamed of, and that's when she met Sajid. At first, he seemed like the perfect target. Wealthy, alone, and clearly craving companionship, she played the role of the soft-spoken, obedient bride to be. She lied about her background, claimed to come from a good family, and avoided any topic that might raise suspicion. Her plan was simple, marry, secure financial assets, and gain power through the marriage. Then eventually walk away with her future set. What she didn't know was that Sajid had already started pulling threads behind her back. He was watching her every move, collecting details, waiting. By the time they stood side by side at the altar, he already had the truth. He just hadn't decided what to do with it yet. The wedding night was meant to mark the beginning of their new life, but within hours it became a crime scene. After the celebration ended, Sajid and Aliyah returned to their luxury penthouse in downtown Dubai. Hotel staff escorted them through the private elevator, where surveillance footage showed them walking in silence. Sajid's face was unreadable, and Aliyah's smile had disappeared. There was no warmth, no affection, only a heavy, visible tension in the air. By 1:30 a.m., the couple had entered their suite. It would be the last time Aliyah was seen alive. In the early hours of the morning, strange sounds echoed from the penthouse, thumps, something breaking, muffled shouting. A housekeeping staff member on the floor below heard what sounded like a struggle but didn't act immediately, assuming it was just a disagreement. It wasn't until 4:00 a.m. that the hotel security team was alerted. Sajid had made a chilling call to the concierge, requesting someone to clean up a mess in his suite. When security entered, they found Aliyah lying on the carpet near the bed, her body cold and bruised. A silk pillowcase was tied around her neck. Sajid was seated in a nearby chair, wearing blood-stained clothing. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. His phone, along with Aliyah's devices, had been wiped or removed. Aliyah's handbag was missing. Her jewelry was gone. What remained was a twisted scene of violence and silence. Police were called immediately, and Sajid was taken into custody without incident. In interrogation, Sajid confessed. But the details he gave painted a picture, not of a sudden outburst, but a cold unraveling. He told officers that after the wedding, he confronted Aliyah with evidence he had gathered. Documents proving her real identity, her previous relationships, her hidden marriage in Pakistan. He had phone records, financial statements, and even photos. He laid them out in front of her, expecting honesty. What followed, he claimed, was a mixture of lies and defiance. He said she denied everything, laughed at his accusations, and called his bluff. That's when something inside him snapped. According to Sajid, the betrayal was too much to bear. He had spent his life controlling everything, his business, his image, his wealth, and now he felt used, mocked, humiliated on the most important night of his life. He claimed he didn't plan to kill her, but in that moment he couldn't stop himself. The act of violence was sudden, brutal, and final, but investigators weren't convinced by the simplicity of his story. The room showed no signs of chaos, no overturned furniture or broken objects. It looked staged. The missing electronics, the wiped data, and the calm demeanor he maintained suggested premeditation. His behavior at the wedding, his obsession with surveillance, and the sudden security upgrades at his home all pointed to careful planning. It was clear this wasn't a heat of the moment murder. Sajid had discovered the truth long before the wedding night. And instead of walking away, he had chosen to go through with it, perhaps as a punishment, perhaps for control, or maybe for revenge. Either way, by sunrise, Aaliya Khan was dead, and Sajid's perfectly constructed empire had begun to crumble. The news of the murder spread rapidly, dominating headlines across the UAE and South Asia. A rich, older Dubai businessman killing his young, beautiful bride on their wedding night was a story that ignited public fascination. Television talk shows dissected every detail, social media buzzed with speculation, and the press scrambled to uncover more about the mysterious bride and the cold, calculating groom. For weeks, the case was all anyone could talk about. What began as a luxurious wedding had become a grim tale of deception, power, and death. Sajid Mirza's trial began 2 months after the incident. It was held in a packed courtroom under heavy security. He appeared calm, composed, and emotionless, his expression unchanged from the night he was arrested. His lawyers argued that Sajid had suffered a psychological breakdown triggered by betrayal. They painted him as a man who had lived in isolation for years, emotionally starved, and pushed to the edge by a woman who preyed on his vulnerability. They claimed the murder was not premeditated, but a tragic outcome of emotional overload. The prosecution had a different story. They presented Sajid as a man obsessed with control. They argued that he had discovered Aliyah's past weeks before the wedding, yet proceeded with the marriage so he could orchestrate her downfall. They showed how he wiped devices, altered the crime scene, and eliminated evidence. They highlighted how he moved assets days before the wedding, suggesting he anticipated a legal battle. The argument was simple. This wasn't a man who lost control. This was a man who carefully planned a punishment disguised as passion. Just as the trial was reaching its climax, an unexpected development changed everything. Investigators uncovered a secret bank account in Aliyah's name, created just a few days before the wedding. The account held nearly $2 million, deposited in 2 large transfers from an offshore company registered in the British Virgin Islands. When traced, the company was found to be a shell firm linked to a rival business group that had clashed with Sajid years earlier. This revelation opened the door to an entirely different theory. Had Aliyah been planted in Sajid's life by his enemies? Was she sent not to love him but to destroy him? Suddenly, her hidden past, her lies, and her quick marriage made sense in a different way. Maybe she hadn't been trying to trap Sajid for her own gain, but was part of a larger scheme to ruin him financially, emotionally, and socially. The timing of the money transfers, the silence of Aliyah's past associates, and the deletion of key data raised serious questions, but those questions remained unanswered. With Aliyah dead and Sajid refusing to testify further, the full truth died with her. The judge, while acknowledging the complexity of the case, found Sajid guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As the media frenzy died down, all that remained was a haunting story with missing pieces. Aliyah's motives were never fully revealed. Sajid's final reasons stayed locked behind his silence, and the possibility of a deeper conspiracy remained buried under legal documents and sealed evidence. The case, once burning with attention, faded into mystery, leaving behind a shattered life, a ruined legacy, and a question that still lingers: who was really playing who?